Um, Welcome everybody. My name is Wilma Holly, and the webinar you're watching is Florida Snakes. And we have with us our residential horticulture agent for part of our webinar, Donna Cook. She's helping monitor the chat for while she's here. So extension, for those of you that aren't familiar, I think most of you have already watched enough of these programs that you probably are familiar with it, but we want to make sure that people that aren't familiar with it know. Oh, somebody, the webinar didn't work, huh? Oh, that's interesting. Did anybody else have trouble with the webinar link? Okay, I'm gonna, okay, so Extension is a partnership between Sarasota County, the University of Florida, and USDA. All counties in Florida, all 67 counties have Extension offices. Some are two counties together because they're such small counties, but they still have Extension offices. So the University of Florida does the research, and they give us resources to use, and it's all scientifically based research. And then we provide the practical education for residents through all these kinds of classes and other kind of community outreach and volunteer opportunities and stuff like that. And our extension office here in Sarasota has all of these different programs plus others that we don't even have on here. But I am the Florida Friendly Landscaping Horticulture Specialist, Program Specialist, and Donna, who's with us, is the Residential Horticulture Agent. And Florida Friendly Landscaping is kind of under the Residential Horticulture umbrella. So today Florida Snakes is under the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program, and Florida Friendly Landscaping Program has these 9 principles. And each one of these we could talk to you an hour or so on, but we're not going to do that to you today. But basically, attracting wildlife is the principle that you're using for Florida snakes. Some people would be not attracting wildlife, but also managing yard pests responsibly, because if you're controlling insects and other stuff, you don't want to damage the snakes or hurt the snakes with chemicals and things like that. So managing yard pests responsibly. And if they are a pest to you, if that's why you're watching today, because you don't want snakes in your yard, you won't really get too much information on that, but managing them responsibly where you're not hurting them and keeping them out of your yard. There's some stuff you can, keep tall grass out and, not have stuff close to your house and things like that. You're going to keep them away more. So that'll help. So basically what we're covering today, we're doing some identification of the harmful and the harmless characteristics and managing snake encounters, because if you do come across venomous snakes, you have to be extremely careful. And then we're going to talk about the venomous snakes in Florida. There aren't too many in Florida, fortunately, and in the Sarasota County area, we only have 4. I realize some of you are from other areas of Florida, so you'll know where you're from and if those snakes are in your area. And then a few exotic snakes, and then some snake lookalikes. So snakes, just for an overview, they're legless reptiles, and they rely on their surroundings for their thermal regulation. So if it's hot out, they may be hiding in the shade, but if it's cold out, they may be on a hot rock or somewhere they can take in some sun rays to regulate their temperature. They can hinge their lower jaw to eat prey about 3 times their size. So, and that just amazes me when you see them eating something, how big it is compared to the size of their head and their mouth. It's just really amazing. All snakes are carnivorous, and of over 3,000 species of snakes, only about 375 are venomous. So we're fortunate to only have 6 in Florida. And in Florida, there are 44 to 46 established species, and then 45 subspecies of native snakes. And then, of course, there's some other species that come in and out, and ones that have been brought in that aren't supposed to be here. 35 species are found in Central Florida. So the area, Central Florida is Sarasota County and surrounding counties. And like I said, there's only 6 venomous species in Florida. The Eastern Diamondback and the Timber Rattlesnake and the Pygmy Rattlesnake. And then of course the Cottonmouth and the Copperhead, which is not in Sarasota County, and the Coral Snake. And the other one that's not in Sarasota County is a Timber Rattlesnake. Copperhead and the Timber are in North Florida. So for a short, very short time, I don't know exactly how short, but after a snake is killed, it has reflexes that may continue to work. So you never want to handle a newly killed venomous snake because you still can get bitten. It's not going to be a long time because their reflexes are going to stop soon, but you still just be wary of that. A lot of snake bite victims are bitten on the hands and arms trying to handle the snake, or think, oh, I'm brave, I can handle this. And it's just really usually unnecessary. I mean, some handle while you're walking through the woods, or you get bit walking through the woods, that you can't always avoid, but being bitten on the hands and the arms trying to handle a venomous snake is sometimes avoidable. So a snake can only strike about half of its length. So generally a broom handle, if you're trying to get a snake out of a building, or it can keep you safely out of striking distance. So not that you're going to be carrying a broom with you all the time, but if you're trying to get one out of a building or something like that, or if you're not sure if it's venomous and you need to move it gently away, the broom handle, unless it's a really, really long snake, is long enough to help you without getting bit. A majority of your encounters with domesticated dogs can end in a fatality. So you want to make sure that your vet carries anti-venom if you're in an area where some of these venomous snakes are. And when you find a snake that you don't know if it's venomous or harmless, just leave it alone. That's probably the biggest, most important factor on venomous snakes. Just leave them alone. There's a graphic that's online. I usually put it in the webinar, but I couldn't find the source of it, and we're not really supposed to use source information that we don't know the source of, especially now that we're doing videos. But it has a graphic. It shows like, is the snake venomous? And yes, and then, okay, are you trying to trap it or harm it? And if it's yes, then it's dangerous. And if no, then it's not dangerous. And it goes on down. And so at the very end, if it's dangerous, if you're doing anything to it and it doesn't have a means of escape, but if it has a means of escape and you're not trying to harm it, then it's harmless. So again, leaving it alone, that's the gist of the whole thing. Most snakes are not going to be aggressive, and unless they are cornered, they will flee when humans approach, and using a broom to herd the larger harmless snakes out of human habitations. And we've actually, our extension office in Sarasota County, we've had a couple, 2 or 3 different times snakes in the building. So people leave the door open to air it out, or somebody sprayed something and it smells, or the air conditioning's not working, and they open the doors to let a cross breeze come through, and then kind of snakes wander their way in. And we had one that somebody said, "Oh, a snake," and so I said, "Okay, get me a garbage can." And she's up on a chair, and she said, "I'm not getting you anything, just get it out of here." So I had to get the garbage can, and you put the garbage can over it, and slide something underneath it and slide it out the door. But for a venomous snake, this venomous snake here, this is all from the University of Florida. I think the Florida Museum of Natural History. They have a series of these pictures. And so you can just lay a garbage can down and gently, because if you hash at it or strike at it, it's going to scare it, and you're not going to be able to. You're probably going to harm it. But just slow, firm strokes to guide it into the can. You don't want to flail at it, and then once you get it in there, you're going to want to take it somewhere else to dump it out. but you don't want to handle it, and keep your hands on the outside edge so that you don't hurt yourself. And you want to release it into an area where pesticides haven't recently been established, been used, applied. If you can't get it into the can, you can turn the can up over side of it and then slide cardboard or something underneath, then it will be inside, and then you turn it over, and because they can't climb up the side. So venomous snakes, they have elliptical pupils, they have a nostril, and then they have that pit, and their fangs are hollow and small hooked teeth. Non-venomous, except for the coral snake. Coral snake is venomous, and this is only one that has round eye pupils, and it just has small hooked teeth. It doesn't have the fangs, and the tongues are harmless. People, sometimes see the tongue coming in and out. That's how they smell, and of course they drink water and stuff. So they're just trying to smell their surroundings to see if there's any food or anything like that. So so the coral snake is the only one different. And here are the lists, which I've already told you. So the timber snake and the copperhead are not in Sarasota County. There's a couple snakes that look similar to copperheads when they're small. So a lot of people will swear that they've seen copperheads, but they're not in this area. Now, if you're up in the panhandle, then yes, you very likely. So the diamondback rattlesnake is a very, very bulky body, very heavy, very thick. And of course, it has the rattles on the tail. They can lose those, so that's not, you can't just go by that alone. The back is dark brown with those diamond-shaped markings. And the timber rattlesnake has that brown band down through it's the whole line of its back. It does not have the diamond shape. Glad I remember to turn my phone off, it's ringing. So diamondback rattlesnakes, they generally stay in the undergrowth unless you disturb it. It inhabits palmetto pine areas, flatwoods, edges of wet savannas, but it can be found anywhere. So that's the thing that can. I live in Northport in Florida, and I haven't seen one myself, but I've heard of them being in people's garages and stuff like that. Northport, a lot of Northport is undeveloped, so there's a lot of wooded areas, wooded lots that haven't been cleared yet. So it's quite likely that I could see one, because I don't border, I kitty corner wooded lots. So it wouldn't at all be surprising for me to see one, but they do make an S-shaped striking position, and the fangs can penetrate through clothing and thin shoes. So that's one of the recommendations if you're walking in the woods or you're hiking anywhere, to wear steel-toed shoes, or at least the leather work boots, so that it wouldn't be able to penetrate that, because that would be the other place people get in bed when they're trying to handle, but then when they're walking on their legs and their feet. So if you have the shoes on where they can't penetrate, you're going to be a lot safer. So they eat small mammals, from mice to rabbits. It's our largest native snake. They can get over 8 feet, but generally are found only around 4 to 6 feet. And the babies are born live, and they also already have fangs and venom, but they don't have a rattle on the tail yet. And they can strike when they're little. Of course, there would be a lot less venom in a little baby rattler than in a grown rattler, but you still want to be careful of the little ones. So the pygmy rattlesnake also has that real thick, heavy body, but it's only about 18 inches long, 18 to 24. I've seen some that are a little bit bigger, but not really bigger than 24 inches. But they have a grayish body with some whitish stripes, and the black alternating with a little bit of brown in between. But they can be a little bit different looking. Here's one on the bottom that, these are all from the Florida Museum of Natural History. And they finally, after 20 or 30 years, just updated their photos. So they've got a lot of new photos, and I've updated part of my slide, but but not all of them. But you can see all these pictures again. You can go back and look at them again and see any of these that you say, oh, I need to see that again. The Florida Museum of Natural History, which is a link in that that I sent you earlier this morning. So their rattle sound, you know, when you hear the rattle, it sounds more like an insect buzzing. So you could actually be fairly close because you're not going to hear it unless you're within a few feet of it. And they're very quick to strike. They're probably less apt to flee you than to strike if you're that close. So there's a light and a darker variation there. I've seen the light one. It was in a swampy area up in Pinellas County, and it was this color. I mean, they are beautiful, but you need to be wary of them. Their bite is very painful and it swells, but it's not usually reported to be fatal. They coil and strike rapidly. They prefer pine flatwoods and marsh areas, which is where I saw the one, tall grasses, canals, and pond banks. And they're going to eat anything small enough that they can get in their mouth, which includes the frogs and the lizards, other snakes. They also give birth to live young, which are also capable of venomous bites. So, and they look quite similar to the hognose snake, but they have the vertical pupils and the rattle, whereas the hognose snake doesn't. But the hognose snake will imitate snakes sometimes, other snakes. So the Cottonmouth, it's a large pit viper, again with a bulky body. It's also called water moccasin. And they get up to about 5 feet long, brown to black. As they get older, they get darker and darker, and you don't always see all those spots on them. And sometimes they can have cross bands on the back, but not always. And they're very stout with an abrupt tapering tail, but of course no rattle. And the head is wider than the neck. And you'll find that in a lot of the venomous snakes, that the head is bigger than the neck. And that's one way for a quick identification, but not the only thing, because I have a picture to show you that sometimes it'll look like the head's bigger than neck, and it's just the way it's eating something or something like that. They have frowning looking eyes with a dark band behind the eyes. And that makes them always look angry. And this was one of the new photos that the Florida Museum of Natural History had. And you can see that you don't see the cross bands on the back. You can almost imagine them there. They're probably there a little bit, but it's gotten old enough that they're pretty dark there. And here's another picture that they just posted. You can see that dark band behind the eyes, and you can actually see the almost triangular shape of the head there. So the Cottonmouth is the only venomous water snake. There's several other water snakes in Florida, but that's the only one that's venomous. And this one can be aggressive. We had one of my coworkers that was actually chased in Gainesville by Cottonmouth. Usually they aren't quite that aggressive, but they're very dangerous. So if you see them, don't try to go up to them. Just stay well away from them. And if they start coming in your general direction, get out of there. It opens its mouth when threatened, and it has a white mouth, and that gives it its name of Cottonmouth. And they are throughout all of Florida, including the islands near the shore and all the counties, even down in the Keys. So it's something you need to be careful of. Usually found in daylight on tree limbs or grassy patches near shoreline. And it eats fish, frogs, small mammals, etc. And the babies have a yellow tail. And that's a picture with the mouth open, how it got the name of Cottonmouth. And there, on this one, you can see the cross bands. And you can really see that stout body in this picture. These are all from the Florida Museum of Natural History. And this is a juvenile color pattern of the Florida Cottonmouth. And there's another snake that I show you later on that has a similar look to it, but different, not the band behind the eyes. And you can't always see the pupils in the eyes. So that's not it. If you're close enough to see the pupils, you could be in severe danger. So the coral snake, again, this one is the viper, and it's similar to cobra venom. It's a very, very potent venom, most potent in America. It's a neurotoxin. And this red touch yellow can kill a fellow, red touch black, friend of Jack. That's a standby that I always heard my whole life. But really, we know red light's better. We're not always going to be able to think of that little ditty when we see a snake. Oh my gosh, what is that? And you get it mixed up and then you're in trouble. You know that when you see a red light and then a yellow light and then a red light, that you need to stop. So when you see a red band and a yellow band together, you know you need to stop, stay away from it. Also, they have a black nose, but you're not always going to see the nose, and you're not always going to remember, which one was which? Is it the black nose or the red nose? But yellow and red together, yellow light, red light, stop. Dr. Johnson from the University of Florida, I heard him say that. Well, I had heard it before that, but I think he's the one that kind of came up with that, and it makes perfect sense, and it's so much easier to remember in an emergency. So they don't have any fangs or any rattle. The head is the same size as the body, and the pupils are round, but again, you're not always going to see those pupils. They're not usually aggressive, and if you're trying to handle them or you come across them and trying to move it, then they can be aggressive, or they can bite you, but generally they're not going to. They're about 2 feet long, and they're found in leaf litter and places like that, and they do lay eggs. Some of my coworkers in Pinellas County, when I was up there, found one in a water box, where they read the meters and everything. So that is something when you're going into a dark, cold air, not cold in Florida, but a cooler area, a place where they might want to hide, or you're raking leaves out from under bushes. It's something I need to remind myself to do, is to wear gloves and maybe use a tool and not my hands all the time. Because that's a case where you could get bitten, because you could accidentally pull one of those out. So here's a couple of lookalikes that sometimes get confused with them. The coral snake with a black nose, the Scarlet Kingsnake with a red nose, and the Scarlet Snake with a red nose. And again, the yellow on the Scarlet Kingsnake is against the black. It's not against the red, and the same with the Scarlet Snake. So that's two ways, excuse me, to remember those. But like I said, you don't always see the head, but if you see those stripes, you can remember the red and yellow with the, so they eat lizards, other snakes, and they eat frogs. So here's a review for the venomous snakes. Heads that are generally heart or triangle shaped, and the viper bodies are very, very, very stout. Harmless snakes are usually thin, long, and wiry, except for the coral snake. They have a head like most of your other snakes. So that's the only one you have to worry about different. But and this is where I wanted to show you the difference between this head looks like it's triangular, and you would think, oh my gosh, that's a stern snake. But again, they make their head bigger to eat their prey. So that's what happened in this picture. This is a harmless water snake. But it scared, this is from one of our master gardeners. She, it was in her yard, and you can see it's right next to her house, and she has a tiny little dog, and she was worried about it because of that. But luckily she sent me the pictures, and I was able to determine what it was. Once I saw this picture, I couldn't tell exactly by the first picture, but it's a banded water snake. It's very, very harmless, unless you shoot that poor little frog. And this is something I wanted to show you, because so many people think that snake bites are, snakes are the worst evil on earth, and more people die. This is an average US fatality. More people die from spider bites, dog bites, hornets and bee stings, lightning strikes, and then of course cars and diseases. But when you're talking about dogs, spiders, and hornets, more people are dying from those every year than they're actually dying from snakes. So it's just something snakes are, you need to appreciate them and be wary of them, especially the venomous ones. But because now we have cell phones and we usually can get treatment really, really fast, we're a lot less likely to die from snake bites, but that doesn't mean you're not going to, so don't let one bite you. Non-venomous snakes, most snakes, again, we're gonna say flee when approached, but you wanna give them room to run and don't panic. All snakes are carnivorous. Smaller snakes eat smaller prey, insects, worms, anoles, other snakes, things like that. Larger snakes are gonna eat larger prey, rodents, rabbits, other snakes, and even, yeah, I guess other snakes, rats is what I was thinking of. So really snakes are good to have around. Some snakes eat other insects and they eat things like the roaches, which I call palmetto bugs. I make one of my coworkers mad every time I say that because she says they're not palmetto bugs, but that's their common name. So they're really beneficial in our yards to have snakes to take care of some of the rodents and some of the things that can cause diseases and damage to our yards. So here's a few that we're going to go through. We can't go through all the Florida snakes, but some of the more common ones. And this is the black racer is probably the one that I see the most in my yard. Although recently I've seen corn snakes a couple of times, or a red rat snake and a corn snake. So I was really excited to see a couple different kinds. They are really fast, and they are one that comes out in the daytime. That's what diurnal means. They have a white chin and belly. So a lot of people get confused. They'll see indigo snake, or they'll say it's an indigo snake, and then you'll look at the picture and it has a white chin. So it's not an indigo snake, it's one of these. And I'll show you an indigo snake picture later. They like dry habitats, but they will eat frogs and lizards. And of course, we have some frogs that aren't in water areas, but they will go on the edge of a pond or something and get them. But they also eat venomous snakes without being damaged. They lay eggs in the leaf litter or mulch or in a cool kind of damp area, May through August, and the eggs hatch in August through October. They're very hyperactive. They don't make good pets. I hatched some from eggs once. Well, basically I hatched them because I wanted to see what kind of snake it was. I was hoping it was a corn snake or something, but they weren't. They were these. This is one of them. And they do not make good pets. They're very scared of you immediately. And so I released the snakes that were born. But you can see the young ones look way, way different than the adults. And a lot of people will confuse these with a pygmy rattlesnake. In fact, just this week, I had somebody bring one into the office. Unfortunately, they had killed it because their lawn guy told them it was a pygmy rattlesnake, and it was one of these guys. And I always thought that they would never come near you. But I had a client that had a problem around their pool area with snakes coming around the pool area and scaring people half to death. And I said, well, normally they flee when they see people. And so this one was in my driveway, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna stand here and see what happens. So it was not scared of me until I moved, and then it took off like a bolt. It was just lightning bolt. It just took off. So yes, they will come up to you if you're not moving. And there it was, it almost looked like, I thought, why did I leave my hose there at first? And then I saw it moving and saw its head. And so yeah, they will come up to you. That's where it was when I saw it. And these were the eggs that I hatched. And people, a lot of times they'll ask me how big they are. Can you see my pinky there down to the knuckle? About that big, probably a little bit wider than that. Probably about 1.5 times the size of my knuckle there, or my lower pinky. So I found these underneath a clay pot when I was moving, and I knew that they would have gotten destroyed. So I brought them with me and put them in some leaf litter and kept it moist and damp. And not all of them hatched, but well, most people would not take a snake from the wild, but some people do encroach on their environment I'm not teaching people to take a snake from the wild. I didn't take any snakes from the wild. I protected these eggs so I could release them. The other snake was in my driveway. I didn't take it. I'm not teaching people to take anything from the wild. I'm teaching just exactly the opposite. I want people to respect nature, leave them alone. And these I protected. And as soon as they hatched, I released them out into the yard. And all kinds of birds and everything else eat snakes. This was another juvenile black racer. I took this through my car window when I pulled out of my driveway and saw it take off. So I stopped and got a picture. But no, I would never take a snake from the wild. I don't teach that at all. This is the Eastern Indigo Snake. Again, remember I was telling you about the black racer having the white chin. So this one has a few red spots. And their body's different looking, especially in the sun. You can see almost iridescent blue color to it. That's why it gets that indigo snake color, or the name Indigo Snake. The belly is lighter color, and it also has those spots on the chin. So they have a pretty stout body, not as stout as the venomous species, but fairly stout. They do come out in the daytime. It's a threatened species, and they're in drier habitats, and they usually live in gopher tortoise burrows, which gopher tortoise are also threatened, and they're an extremely important species because all these other species use their burrows. And in Northport, there's a lot of gopher tortoise burrows, so I'm hoping that some of these lots never get built up. Corn snake, this is what my snake, what I was told that it was when I bought it at the store, and it turned out not to be a corn snake. It's a red rat snake, but I think it might have possibly been crossed or something. Anyway, I saw this one in my yard and took some pictures of it before it went away. They're very good climbers and very good burrowers. They like dry habitats. They're mostly nocturnal, which is funny because I bought the snake because I wanted it to be diurnal, so it would be out during the daytime and not at night. I ended up with just the opposite of what I was trying, so I could show people about snakes without taking one out of the wild. They eat lizards, frogs, rodents, and unfortunately birds and eggs too, and they're good climbers, so they can do that. They lay eggs which hatch in July through September, and they can live up to 22 years. And they have a beautiful pattern on their stomach. This, unfortunately, was a dead one that I came across. I don't know what happened to it. It didn't have any marks on it or anything. So I just don't know what happened to it, but I did get a picture of the belly. Oh, well, they were the eggs that I hatched. Okay, so this person's asking, you just said that particular snake doesn't make good pets because it's scared of humans, so you released it. I hatched the eggs, and I was hoping that because I hatched the eggs that I could keep one of them if it was a corn snake. It wouldn't be taken out of the wild because I had the eggs already. The eggs would have been destroyed if I had left them. That's why I released it. But if it had been a corn snake, I probably would have kept one to be able to show in my classes, but it wouldn't be like taking it out of the wild because I had actually hatched the eggs and I had actually kept them from getting killed. But I see what you're meaning now. Yeah, no, I wouldn't take one out of the wild. I wouldn't go out there and pick one up and bring it in to make it into a pet. I see what you're saying. Rat snakes can be red, they can be yellow, they can be gray. 40 to 77 inches long, and mine turned out to be a rat snake, the one that I bought as a corn snake, but it does have some similar spots to some corn snakes, but it doesn't have the pretty belly or anything. They are good climbers, and mine is already probably 62, 63 inches long. It's as tall as me already. Excellent climbers. Of course, mine doesn't get to climb, but you can see this is a yellow rat snake I saw up north of Pinellas County. I can't remember exactly where, but anyways, this is my snake. He was captive bred, so I didn't worry, that's why I didn't get one out of the wild, because I wanted a captive bred one to show the proper care and everything. He was not quite so smart when he was younger, and they usually grab their food by the head. He hadn't learned that yet, but after he got bit on this one, and it bit him all the way down. I mean, he had it almost gone and it still had hold of him. He flinched when it bit him, and it's happened to him a couple of times, but now he always grabs. I don't actually feed him the anoles anymore. These are invasive, so I didn't worry about feeding him something that's invasive, but they're harder to catch, and his poop stinks worse when he eats those. So I just resorted to I hate feeding them mice because they're so cute, but it's part of the web's life cycle. You have to feed them something. So anyways, this was another one when another invasive anole that I had fed him. And then he does this after he eats. It makes him look like he's really scary. But I think because when they have that food in their mouth, it kind of covers up, they can't breathe as good. They can breathe some, but not as good. And I think they're just gulping for air, but he does that all the time. And just before they shed, they get really, really pale. So out in the wild, this would be an extremely vulnerable time for snakes. He actually doesn't move for about a week. He crawls into one of his little corners underneath the wood and ceramic that he has, and just stays there. He gets really, really pale. And then about a day before he sheds, he turns bright again, and then the next day he'll shed. So it used to scare me. I used to get so worried that something was wrong with him when he turned pale. I mean, you can see his eyes. Well, they shed the skin over their eyes. They can't close their eyes, so they shed the skin over their eyes. And I used to get so scared that something was wrong with them. But eventually, after he sheds about once a month. See, this is all stuff I didn't know about snakes. He sheds really often. I was so surprised. I thought they shed maybe once a year or something. And maybe out in the wild, if they're not eating quite as good, they might not shed quite as often. But now that he's older, he might go 6 to 8 weeks in between shedding, but he's still shedding fairly often. And that's when he's starting to brighten back up. And then this was right after shedding. So you can see how much brighter they are when they shed. And then he likes to soak in the water. I have some more pictures at the end, but I figured everybody might not want to listen to that part. There's about 20 or 30 more slides, which go really fast after I get through with this whole webinar to show you some more stuff about them. Including eating and stuff like that. But some of you may be in a rush and want to get out. The whole webinar doesn't last a full 2 hours. So if you have the time, you're welcome to stay. And if you don't want to, that's understandable too. So the Florida Kingsnake, I love, this is such a beautiful snake. They're diurnal, they come out in the daytime. They only get up to about 48 inches long. That's the large end of it. They have very distinct cross bands, but I love this checkerboard pattern. I want to come across one of these so I can get some good pictures of it. It's relatively uncommon, so it's not likely I'll come across it, but they eat other snakes and they're even immune to rattler venom. And they eat lizards, frogs, rodents, birds, and eggs. And unfortunately, that's part of the life cycle too. You hate hearing that they're eating birds and eggs, but the way I look at it, if everything lived, we would be overrun with everything, even butterflies. People constantly worry about their butterfly eggs or their baby caterpillars being eaten by wasps, and they'll go out and they'll kill all the wasps and this and that. But if every single butterfly lived, we would be swatting butterflies away from our face. So it's the web of life, and it's part of our life. So I think to have some stuff getting eaten, even though it's sad, maybe we shouldn't worry about it quite so much. And there's one of the new photos that the Museum of Natural History put in, and they're just absolutely beautiful. It's harder, you can see the crossbands, but with all the little checkery, I call it checkered, it's not even really checkered, it's just spotted. It's just gorgeous. Anyway, Scarlet Kingsnake, they're a fairly small snake. They come out at night. only get up to about 20 inches. They have very distinct rings. And again, the yellow is not touching the black, so you know it's not bad. They're fairly common in pinelands and hardwood hammocks, and they eat small snakes, lizards, and rodents. One thing, when I do, well, we haven't done any live webinars in over a year, but when I would go out to HOAs, sometimes people would ask me to come to different homeowners associations to do webinars. And a lot of times, a lot of them are built on golf courses, or golf courses are built next to them. And when they build those golf courses, they're knocking down a lot of hammocks, hardwood hammocks and pinelands and things like that. And people were starting to see a lot of snakes come into their yards and up on their patios and stuff like that. So people would bring me pictures a lot of times of a snake to try to identify what it was. And I usually have to go to the Florida Museum of Natural History, because if it's colored different than the ones I've seen, and you have young ones that are colored different than older ones and things like that. But they were seeing more snakes coming in because of the habitat loss to the snakes. And these lay eggs from May to August, and the babies are 3 inches long. I'd love to see one of those. Burrower, they're a burrower and a great climber, and they're not aggressive, so that would be a good one. Scarlet Snake, they also have the distinct bands, and the yellow's not as bright on these, but it is in between the black with a whitish belly. They like dry habitats, pine flatwoods, dry prairies, hardwood hammocks, sand hills. This is another one that's habitat loss because of some of the building going on. And they're also a very small snake, up to 20 inches, and they're out at night. They burrow under rocks, logs, and underground. One of our master gardeners was digging in our pollinator garden and came across one of these. Just, covered it back up and moved around, planted his plant somewhere else. They eat small snakes, lizards, rodents, reptiles, and reptile eggs, not reptiles. Eastern Coachwhip snake, this is a fairly large snake, up to 72 inches, very large and long and slender. It gets darker up towards the head and lighter in the back. Likes dry habitats. It moves really fast and disappears quickly, so don't see a lot of those, because if they hear you coming. They do eat lizards and small mammals and birds. They will strike and rattle their tail in defense, even though they don't have a rattle on their tail. It's just a defense to try to make people think that it's a rattlesnake, to leave it alone. So rough green snake, this one is a beautiful, beautiful snake. 22 to 32 inches, so not very big. They're bright green with a pale, pale yellow belly, eats insects. Habitat is mixed hardwood and bottomland forest, so it freezes when startled, and then sometimes it'll sway back and forth. It's also an egg layer in late summer and under damp objects, so out in the woods, under logs and places like that. And garter snakes, this is one snake that I was a little more familiar with because we had it a lot up in New York State, where I'm from. But I don't see near as many of these here. I saw a couple in Pinellas County when I was there. I think I saw the blue striped garter snake. They're typically green or blue with that dorsal stripe. And this one you can't really see a dorsal stripe on. 20 to 28 inches, so not really big. They are out in the daytime, so it would be one that you could come across. They like drier habitat. So if you're a person that does a lot of hiking and stuff like that, unfortunately, I don't get out as much as I would like to. So I do occasionally, but I haven't come across too many snakes out in the wild. I come across them in my yard more than anywhere else. They eat earthworms and frogs and fish. So they do seek food near water, but they typically don't live in the water, but they'll live on dry land near water. They are related to ribbon snakes. And the ribbon snake is a long, slender snake, 18 to 26 inches, and they can be in different colors. They come out in the daytime, semi-aquatic. So this is one that will get in the water and live near pinelands and marshes and flooded areas, and frequently seen in residential areas. And this is one I saw in Pinellas County at the Florida Botanical Gardens, because that's where I worked when I was up there at the extension office up there. Frequently seen in residential areas. So, and they eat small fish, frogs, salamanders, earthworms, and they bear live young. So different than several of the other snakes we saw earlier. And this is a blue striped subspecies of the eastern ribbon snake. Just gorgeous. And the hognose snake, this is the one that the pygmy rattlesnake often gets confused with. The reason it's called hognose is because of the shape of its nose. It looks kind of like a hog or pig. But they do resemble those pygmy rattlesnakes. They also have that stout body, kind of like the pygmy rattlers. And this one does flatten its head and hiss, so it mimics the pygmy rattler, but it doesn't. It's not dangerous. It's not venomous. It eats toads and sometimes lizards and frogs and small snakes. The southern one is more rare. It gets up to 21 inches. The eastern one is a little more common, and it gets up to 33 inches. And they can have variable color patterns. So, the really cool thing about this thing, I want to run across one because when they feel threatened, they will feign death. They'll turn over on their back and just lay there with their stomach up in the air, open its mouth, and just lay that way for a little while. And then sometimes it'll defecate and regurgitate, which I guess scares other animals away. I would think if it's feigning death, then that's a perfect opportunity for something to come and grab it. But apparently they don't like the defecation and the regurgitation, and they'll leave it alone. So I would love to come across one of those, and then I probably wouldn't feel like scaring it. So I wouldn't feel comfortable because I know that, you're irritating it, then you're not harming it, but harassing it. And I wouldn't do that. So I never probably would get to see that. But if I came across it accidentally and scared it, then it would be fun to see. It looks around and crawls away after a few minutes. So, and you can see this one here is quite a bit different colored than those ones there. Okay. And the pine snake, this is another one, very, very long, up to 66 inches. You can see this picture down on the bottom. It has a very indistinct pattern of blotches and colors. And this is another one that will inflate and raise its head when it feels threatened, but generally not anything to be worried about. It's a species of special concern. It's very rare, and that's one of the reasons it's a species of special concern, not on the threatened species list yet, but could be because it is so rare, because of habitat loss mainly. And they eat pocket gophers, which are a little tiny, not tiny, but probably a little bit bigger than a mole. Probably most of you know what a mole is, and just a little furry rodent-like creature. And pocket gophers actually in fields of farmers can be a danger because cows and horses can, step in one of those holes and break their leg or something. But that's mainly where you would see them is in farmland and open areas where you see the holes that the pocket gophers make. They live only in deep sandy soils. So not likely that we would ever see those. Southern ringneck snake, this is one I see quite frequently in the yard. They're only about 10 inches long when they're full grown. Slender black with that colored ring around its neck, and also the color on the belly. Usually orange, more orange towards the back, but sometimes a little darker than this. They're nocturnal, they're in dry habitats, but when you move a flower pot or something like that, or you're moving mulch around, you might see one out in the yard. We have a lot of people bring them into the office because they found them in their pool and they're worried about what they are. They get in the pool to try to get a drink of water, and then they can't climb back out. You see them in the landscape a lot. They're terrestrial burrower, so they dig into the ground and they do lay eggs, and they have to eat only small things: earthworms, slugs, small frogs, anoles, geckos, skinks, small snakes, and salamanders, but anything small. I do see these quite frequently. This was in my front flower bed. And you can see it's smaller than pine. This was a big piece of pine bark mulch. Most of them were a little bit smaller, but not very long and half hidden. And then as soon as they see you, they usually run away too. And then some of the water snakes, remember the Cottonmouth was the only venomous water snake. So you have all these others. There's quite a few other water snakes, and they're good tree climbers. Vary from 24 to 52, and most of them are nocturnal. So we have brown water snake, midland water snake up in the panhandle, and this banded water snake in the panhandle. We have a Florida banded water snake here in this area in Central Florida. Then there's a mangrove salt marsh snake, and I think that's the only one that lives in brackish water or saltwater areas. And that one eats small fish and invertebrates in tidal pools. And then the Florida green water snake, even though you really can't see that much green on it, it has a green tinge to it. And probably as it's younger, it eats a little more. And then this mud snake is gorgeous, gets up to 40 inches and eats salamanders. Crayfish snake, only up to 23 inches. And then go back 2 slides. Okay, just let me finish this one and then I'll go back. And then the swamp snake also has that colored belly, so that could be confused with the ringneck snake, but it doesn't have that ring around the neck. And then the Florida brown snake. And most of these I haven't seen. Occasionally people will bring one of them into the office for us to identify, but most of them I haven't seen. So that one, or one more. Holly, you can unmute yourself, and did you have a question on this? Okay, did you have a question about it?
Hi, no, I didn't. I just wanted to see the banded water snake. I'm taking
Oh, okay, all right.
Thank you.
Oh, and we have Erica, you have a question?
Yes, I wanted to comment about the southern, I believe, ring snake.
The ringneck.
Yeah, I've seen them before, I believe.
Yeah, probably.
I'm pretty sure it was that.
Yeah, they're fairly common in residential areas, so it's quite likely that you might have. While I'm thinking about it, if any of you have more than one at the location, one person at the location that you're at, can you put in the chat how many people are there? Because we have to keep track of how many people we have at a webinar and stuff like that. And that would help us if you have 2 or 3 people or a group to put in there. Okay, so we'll continue on. Okay. So water snake mostly, as I said, are active at night, but they sun themselves on the banks and over water, vegetation that's over the water. Sometimes they can startle really easily and sometimes fall into boats or canoes passing beneath them. That would scare me to death if I all of a sudden had a snake, because you're not going to know what it is immediately. And you're not going to want to take the time to figure out what it is, if it's venomous or not. I would just be petrified if that happened. But I would, now that I know this, I would be a little more wary and probably know that it's likely not a venomous snake, but it would probably scare them as much as us. So they eat frogs, crayfish, salamanders, tadpoles, carrion, which is interesting, which is a dead animal, snails and slugs. They're usually in freshwater habitats, but except for that one that's in the saltwater, the mangrove one. Ponds, lakes, streams, rivers, and wetlands. And this is one of the water snakes. I think it might have been a banded water snake, but I didn't quite see. I could only see the belly. I couldn't see the back, so I wasn't quite sure. Birds are huge predators of snakes, and I never really realized that, but they do bother them quite a bit. So some of the invaders, and you've probably heard about the invaders. Okay, yeah. Okay, let me address this. You're saying having too much of butterflies or any animal's insect is not good for whom? I'm not saying it's not good. I'm just saying that if we didn't have the cycle of life with one animal eating another animal, or wasp eating caterpillars or stuff like that, we would be overrun with all these animals. That's why the web of life is so good, because and that's why it's so important to allow animals to eat each other and things like that, because then it keeps each animal in check for the ecosystems. Humans are the ones that destroy things and make things grow out of context with too much of one or too much of another. I'm not in any way saying it's bad. It's just everything keeping it, nature has a way of keeping things in check, and that's what's happening with snakes eating birds and things like that. I'm not saying it's bad or good. It's just part of the balance of life. Okay, so non-native snakes are taking over the ecosystem in the Florida Everglades. You probably heard of the pythons and the hunts that they've had, and because they're losing a lot of the mammals there, they're losing a lot of the natural habitat, a lot of the animals that are normally there, and they're competing with alligators for prey. So we have Burmese pythons, which is probably the most common and the one we hear about the most, the African rock python, the boa constrictor, and there's been some anacondas found there as well. And this is one, a python. This is one of the largest ones that was ever found. I actually think I got this on the Florida Fish and Wildlife website or Facebook through their Facebook page. But it was the Southwest Florida Water Management District reported it. And that one was 18 feet, 9 inch. It was a python, and it was a new record. So it's important for them to get the non-native ones out of there so that the habitat isn't completely destroyed. And here's some of the markings on some of these animals. Anaconda, I've seen in a zoo kind of setting. I've never seen one in real life, but it was the most beautiful animal. But you wouldn't want to come across it outside. I mean, these have been released by pet trade or hurricanes destroying a pet store. I mean, there's different ways. Sometimes it's accidentally, but most of them people release because they have an animal that gets too big, they can't take care of it anymore, and they release them, and then they start creating problems. Here's some uncommon or rare snakes, the Brahminy blind snake. That's also called the flower pot snake, because quite often you'll find it underneath a flower pot. It eats termites and ant eggs and things like that. So you also find it under old wood borders and under logs and things like that. And then this crown snake, 7 to 9 inches. And this one also is gray. You find it in gray, or you find this reddish brownish color. Very, very small. That one there is a full grown one. Earth snake, 7 to 10 inches. Red belly snakes, 8 to 10 inches. So these are all small snakes, and you don't find very often. A pinewood snake, 10 to 12 inches. Short-tailed snake, which also looks a little bit like the pygmy rattler and the hognose, except for that it doesn't have the hognose, but the patterning is similar. Mole king snake, also a similar look to that one. And then the rainbow snakes. So a lot of snakes. A lot of these we're not going to see a lot, but you know, if you're out in the woods, you may see several of them. It just depends on, you know, if you're off the path or you're on a path or moving around, or you're, you know, building in a new lot, you're more apt to see some of these, you know, uncover them. This is one that was, this isn't my picture. It was Kenneth Crisco. He has a lot of the pictures of snakes that were on the Florida Museum of Natural History. This burrows in the ground. It's not even it's not a worm. It's not a lizard. It's not a snake. But it's really cool. It's called a Florida worm lizard. And somebody's cat had dug a couple of them up, and they brought them in for identification. So I've seen them only once, and that was because somebody brought them in to have it identified. Yeah, when I'm saying overrun, I'm usually speaking of humans, you know, taking over. I mean, you know, with the population being as it is, and Florida being the place that people want to come to, there's a lot of habitats that are being built on and then the snakes don't have any place to go, or any other animal. I'm not going to get into humans involved in having balance, because the context of this is for snakes, and to teach people as much about snakes so they can understand them and try to appreciate them and respect them, and not kill them every time they see them. So that's a little bit beyond what I can get into. A glass lizard, they look a lot like a snake. In fact, most people think they are snakes. I think one of the reasons they get called a glass snake is because they're very brittle. People will pick them up by the tail, and the tail will break off. It's a native lizard. And then the 5-line ground skink sometimes eats insects and spiders. But it's also a native. I do see these in Northport every now and then, not a lot, but they have legs, so they wouldn't be a snake. But sometimes when you first see them, you don't actually see the legs. They might be down in the leaf litter. And then the giant tegu, which is invasive, and they want you to report the sightings. I have a little story about a glass lizard. When I lived up in Pinellas County, I was renting, and there was a little hole in the garage door. So I think that's how this happened. But one morning I was rushing to get to work, and I took my clothes out of the washing machine to put them in the dryer so I could fold them when I got home that night. And at the bottom of the washing machine was one of these glass lizards. And the only thing I could think that happened was I had sorted my clothes on the floor and just picked them up and put them in the wash the night before when I went to bed. And when I got up in the morning, you know, there must have been one in there, and I somehow picked it up. Well, anyways, I said, well, I don't have time to deal with, I didn't even turn the clothes on because I figured I needed to rewash them because I didn't know if the snake had, defecated all over them or whatever. And plus, or the lizard. And anyway, so when I got up that night, the snake or the lizard had moved. Even I forget and call them snakes. It had moved. So I'm like, oh, it's still alive. So I picked it up and carefully put it outside. And after about 20 minutes, it did crawl off. But I figured it got in the washing machine because it had been in that pile of clothes. That's the only thing I could think of. But thankfully, I lived through the wash and rinse cycle and all that, but it did. And then it crawled off. I bet you it never came in the garage again, though. Erica, you had your hand raised?
Yes. Where can glass lizards be found?
I've seen them in residential habitats. I've seen them, that was in my backyard. Of course, my backyard wasn't grass. You're more apt to see them in an area and with low plants and things like that. They'll come out and sun themselves if it's a cooler day, things like that. But and I saw them in like a school where I used to work out just along the edge. They'll come out in grassy areas, and so you might be able to find them that way. You have to be very careful though if you pick them up, because they can break themselves to try to protect themselves. So look but don't touch is really a better way to do that. So for non-native reptiles, they really want you to report them if you see one. The tegus and the Argentine black and white tegu and the Nile monitors should be reported. And there's that 1AA, I've got one. There's also a website, which I'll show you in just a minute. Any lizard that's greater than 12 inches and it's not an alligator is not a native lizard, so I'd like them to be reported. These can be very, very dangerous as they get bigger. If you come across them, you want to stay away from them. So you can see they're not snakes because they have legs, but people will sometimes think they're, when you don't see the legs right away, you can think that. Spiny black tail iguanas, the same thing. Even green iguanas, they're invasive and they do a lot of damage to our environments, and they can be dangerous to people, and especially some of the counties where they have high populations, Dade, Broward, Collier, Lee, Charlotte counties. They're confirmed in their breeding. They've been here for more than 10 years and they're expanding their territories, and they can be up to 4 feet in length. So this is one that was one of my coworkers, Catherine Clements, took at Shamrock Park. And this one was another one that somebody else took. So all those kinds of things they want you to report, because they have impacts, because they feed on insects, lizards, fish, bird eggs, nestling birds, hatchling sea turtles. And sea turtles are, protected. Use the burrows of Florida burrowing owls, which is another protected species, and the gopher tortoise. The FWC does have a South Region volunteer program that searches for and traps them, so I'd like you to report those. And this is that I've got one that you can report them to, but there's also the EDD maps. There's a place on there, that's a website that you can report them to. Just always a good thing if you don't know where. I've got one.org, or download the I've got one reporting app or two that you can, or you could probably call my FWC directly, or fwc.com non-natives, and get hold of people and report them. And never let a pet loose. Don't, you've had a pet and you can't take care of it anymore, something like that. Or there are, they have exotic pet amnesty programs where you can take it, no questions asked, you can turn it in. So don't let it loose, because it could become a problem, or a lot of times it's not used to living outside and it may not survive, but they've also multiplied rapidly and overrun areas. So these resources are all in the resources that I sent to you on the sheet. If somebody didn't get the sheet, email me. I'll drop my email into the chat here. There, so if you didn't get the resource link that I emailed out earlier about 7:30ish, email me and ask me for it and I'll send it to you. So these resources are all on there. And this Florida Museum of Natural History, go to the herpetology page. This has changed now because they've updated it. But herpetology, they have a collection. They have an online guide to Florida snake ID. They have links and resources, really super, super good information. So that's some more pictures and some of the ways you can do the identification. Do I have any questions now? If you want to stay, like I said, I have the information about Maisie, but some people probably didn't want to see that. But so I'll take some questions if people have them, or you can just stay on. Okay, nobody's asking any. Okay, so this is Maisie, which up until a few months ago, I thought I still was calling him a corn snake, and then I realized, hey, this isn't a corn snake. He has some of the spots like some corn snakes do, but he's more red rat snake than he is corn snake. He's still a nice snake. He was sold to me as a girl, and he's a boy, but you know, when they're really, really young, you can't tell. And I guess the pet store just wanted to tell me it was something. And this I had done for a school program, so that these are kind of corny. Maisie looking at me, looking at him. Erica, you have a question again?
Is that your pet?
Yeah, he's a pet. I got him because I had to start teaching about snakes, and I didn't know anything about snakes. So it helped me to have a snake so I could learn about how they shed and what they do and how they eat and things like that. I do have a picture of him eating a mouse, so if you really love mice, you might not want to look at that one. But yeah, he's a pet. He's not a warm, fuzzy pet or anything like that, but I do have him for teaching, and when I stop teaching, then I'm hoping one of my coworkers will be able to take over.
Well, that's my dream pet.
Yeah. Thank you,
it
David.
is.
Just a minute. Thank you, David. Yeah, they are the same species as corn snakes. They're the same species, but the corn snakes themselves do have a different patterning and a prettier stomach and things like that. But yeah, they're considered the same species. Thank you for reminding me. So when he's hungry, he looks around a lot more. He crawls around more. He usually just stays in one spot, but you can see he doesn't have that really pretty patterning on the stomach like the typical looking corn snake does. Wondering if there is a way out or where his next meal is. Of course, when he's looking for food, he wants to crawl around more and he would want to get out to hunt for something, but usually he does that when he sees me because he knows I'm the one that brings him the food, I guess. I mean, I don't know how much reasoning they do, but he does follow me around when I come in. And I mean, not follow me around because he's in his cage. I don't let him out, but he'll follow me. If I go near there and I move my hand around, he'll follow it to see if I have a mouse form and stuff like that. So I think he has some reasoning. And then again, I don't know if he's actually yawning or that was just that look he gets when after. And this was when he was smaller. He had a really small water dish. And then as he grew, it was still small here, but he got quite a bit bigger dish after a while. He likes to get up on this log here is actually ceramic. He loves to get up on there and sit in the evening. And sometimes he just gets in the corner and sits. He was quite a bit smaller in these pictures. He's quite a bit larger now. He stretches out sometimes. He's a constrictor, which mainly he eats mice, or if I catch anoles for him, he likes those. But like I said, it's so hard to catch them. They learn. They see you coming and they hide. I haven't tried to catch anyone right now, so sometimes you almost step on them. But once you start catching them, then they're gone. You can't find them again. So it's over really, really quickly for the mouse because he is a constrictor. You can see the mouse foot there. He's wrapped around it, so they're killed quickly. Fortunately, because I wouldn't be able to feed them otherwise. I would have too much trouble with that. And that's where he unhinges his jaws. And you can see when they're unhinged, they do look like that triangular head. So when they're eating, it would be hard to tell any snake from the venomous snake head. And that's why my friend that sent that one picture earlier, because it had that triangular head because it was eating the frog. And it really amazes me. It still amazes me that they can eat something that's that size by unhinging their jaw and getting it down. And you can see it going down through the body after he eats it. So just the tail sticking out, and you can see the majority of it's right in there. He eats about once every 5 days. Probably, 4 to 5 days now that he's a little bit bigger, quite a bit bigger. I probably fed him a little more than I should have when he was younger, because when I talked to the pet store, because he really grew pretty fast. Like I said, he was shedding every month. And they said the more you feed him, the more he's going to grow. And he grew fast. So probably if I had fed him a little less often when he was younger, he wouldn't have grown quite so fast. But when he looks hungry, I pretty much say, okay, you're hungry. I should feed you. Not a good mom, I guess. Oh, yeah, he is still good looking without the belly pattern. Yeah, he is a pretty snake. Yeah, and you can see it going down through the body there. Like I said, I had written this for, I had put together a little slideshow, but I had printed it out. I was doing a STEM program at a school, and so I printed it out and put it in a notebook, and there were several hundred people that came through, and only one person looked at the notebook. So I kind of like to at least show people that are still interested. So he's a good snake. After he gets through eating, he always gets a drink of water. And they use their tongue to smell and to drink the water. And then he does that thing, which I don't know if he's yawning, he's gulping air, what he's doing, but he does it every time after he eats and after he gets his water. You can see the lighting wasn't the best on these pictures, but that one is better. It does make him look a little scary, but okay, Erica, I'm sorry, you had your hand raised again.
My bearded dragon does that when he's like happy and he's like relaxing.
Oh, really? Oh, cool. Maybe
I think
that's a good
that's
sign then. I'll say that he's happy.
so.
That's good.
Yeah, my
Well,
lizard does that sometimes.
Yeah, neat. And then he crawls in his water dish. This is the bigger water dish, and he actually probably needs a bigger water dish, but he still crawls in there and he gets all of his body covered and he goes through it. And sometimes he'll rest in there a while. When he was younger or smaller, he's fairly big here, but he's still smaller than he is now. He would cover his whole body up. If I fill the water dish full, it just runs out because when he gets in there, he displaces most of the water. But he just has his head out of the water here. He can't get his whole body in all at once now, but he still does crawl through it. This is back when he was a little bit younger, where he turns the pale color, as I mentioned earlier, very pale, and then they shed their skin. That's a couple of the same pictures. And here he's just crawling out of the skin. That's how he comes out. And even the eye, like I said, even the eyes, the covering over the eye, the skin over the eye, because they don't have eyelids, they don't close their eyes. So he's crawling out, and then some of the pictures you get a little bit of reflection in, but spends most of his days curled up and sleeping, and then at night he'll crawl around. There he's stacked on top of his water dish. He gets some pretty amazing positions and places where he picks to. Okay, he's realigning his jaws after. Oh, thank you. That must be David. You must know snakes. Thank you so much. He's still, he is realigning his jaws after eating. Oh, well, that makes perfect sense then. The ligaments and tendons stretch when the snake eats, so they yawn to get their jaws back in place. Well, thank you. I've always wondered about that. That makes so much sense now. You own a number of captive bred snakes. Well, that's good. That's good to know. If my coworker does not want Maisie, would you want Maisie when I'm done, which is in September or October or thereabouts? And that's it. He's awake and exploring at night, and I'm looking to see if I have food for him. Okay, well, thank you all. I appreciate you all joining.